to another edition of Chatting with the G-Man. I'm glad to have you with us this afternoon, and we're going to go right into our topic for today. But we're going to ask you first to share this live feed with those that you know. We'll give you a little time to do that. Get yourself settled, get yourself together, and be prepared to receive what we have been given to give you. The topic today is entitled, What Do Those with Challenged Abilities Expect from Society? What do those with challenged abilities expect from society? That's our topic for this afternoon. I'm going to give you a little time to collect yourself and get on the social media pages, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Twitter, whatever the case may be, and invite people to come with and be a part of this broadcast for this afternoon. It's vitally important that society and we who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges begin to really address this issue. We've been talking about for the past few weeks, really few months, about the political aspects of our lives, about the new administration and the direction that it's going in. We've talked about health care. We've talked about Medicaid and Medicare. We've talked about the Republican proposals, both in the House and in the Senate, that would drastically, I believe even fatally, impact the lives of many people who have challenged abilities. So we want you to be a part of this broadcast today. We want you to take an inventory of yourself, in particular those friends of mine and family of mine who are able-bodied. Take an inventory of yourself and see where you stand as it relates to people with challenged abilities. And do you have any friends? Do you have any associates? Anyone close to you that you deal with on a regular basis who has either a physical, developmental, or mental challenge? I've been talking for a few weeks now, and I'm surprised at people that claim and say that they really don't know anyone with a quote-unquote disability. And I'm somewhat surprised because there's 60 million of us, and I know many, of course. I know many through my association, actually myself being physically challenged. But I was surprised how many people, and when I asked them, what do you mean by that? They meant really, those who I talked to, they meant an interpersonal, intimate or even relationship with a person with a challenged ability. They know people, yes, but they don't have a direct contact. They don't have an intimate or relational interaction with people with challenged abilities. And I'm surprised, and I'm really taken aback. But knowing how society has treated us, how society views us, and even we ourselves, how we've allowed over the many decades, scores, and centuries for that matter, how we've allowed ourselves to be victims. Well, we're moving from being victims to advocacy, to even further than that, we're looking to be activists. We're looking to be activists. We've been passive, we've been victims, we've been docile, we've been quiet. Years ago, during the 70s, it used to be called, there was a group called the Silent Majority. Well, there is no greater silent majority in this country over the years than those who have challenged abilities, who society labels as being disabled. There has been no greater group that has been marginalized, disenfranchised, ignored, and mistreated than those who have challenged abilities. And in this society where political correctness is the order of the day, we're so conscious about what we say about people and how we respond to people and you know what we publicly display as it relates to our interacting with people. We're so politically correct about so many groups and so many groups of people. And yet when it comes to people with challenged abilities, we continue to somewhat ostracize and really ignore and exclude, in many instances, the concerns and interests that directly impact the lives of people with challenged abilities. And if you want to expand it, people with challenged abilities are not the only ones impacted, because they have families, they have caregivers. Some of the plans and programs that are being proposed at this present time in 2017 will impact the lives of those who are senior citizens, those who are children, those who are in poverty, that are living below their means, and certainly people with challenged abilities are being threatened. And yes, the reason, because they want to, two reasons actually. The first reason that they give, and they're anxious to give this, is that they want to decrease and actually eliminate the deficit that this country now is under. Just by eliminating Medicaid or reducing it significantly, they are looking at saving $800 billion. At least that's what they're hoping to achieve. That's the first thing. The second thing is they're trying to give the wealthiest amongst us a tax break. In both of these situations, reducing the deficit and improving the lot of those who are the wealthiest amongst us, will be done on the backs and on the lives of people in this country. People that don't have a voice. People that don't have the muscle and the power, political or otherwise, to really impact the situation that they find themselves in, unless we unite, unless we become one, unless our voices are heard. Time for docility, time for passivity, time for being quiet, time for being stoic, time for enduring and putting up with any old thing that comes down the pike. Those days, those times are over. African Americans, of which I'm amongst them, we decided in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that we weren't going to take it anymore. We were going to overcome. We decided that black is beautiful. It's not ugly. It's not distorted. It's beautiful. We decided to fight for our rights. Some literally and some by having boycotts and nonviolent protests and getting legislators to join forces with them. Getting community leaders and even celebrities in the community to join forces. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, and other bills and laws were made to improve the lives of African Americans and others. Those who are homosexual, their sexual preferences is same-sex relationships. They fought to the point that they too have received many benefits. They now can get married. They now can own joint property. They now can have joint bank accounts. Oh yes, there's still attitudes about African Americans. Racism is not dead. Homophobia is not dead. Ableism certainly is not dead. Sexism even isn't dead. But at least the government, at least the establishment is saying that as far as it's concerned, we're not going to allow racism, sexism, homophobic attitudes to direct the course of this nation. People that hold these positions, these very negative, stereotypical, biased and discriminatory positions, they are ostracized. They are criticized. You can lose your job. There was a man who owned a NBA team. He owned the team. And they stripped him of his ownership of the NBA team because of his biased attitude. Good afternoon to my wife, Lady Teresa J. Scott, Lady T, they call her. God bless you, dear. But it seems like we still are kind of on the fence about really championing in a real sense of the word. You know, of the 60 million people who have physical, developmental, or mental challenges, or a combination of the many. There are people even in the entertainment world. There are people that are politicians. There are people that have a lot of clout and influence that have yet to stand up and be counted. Stand up and fight the good fight of supporting the causes that impact the lives of people with challenged abilities. Until we get that kind of cooperation, that kind of support, like in the 1960s. I was alive during the 1950s, but 1960s I was very much aware of. People like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Brown, a famous football player. Kareem was a famous basketball player. Muhammad Ali. Harry Belafonte, a great, of course, Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer of all times, arguably. Good afternoon, Shirley, my sister-in-law. Others within the celebrity world stood side by side. Sammy Davis Jr. stood side by side Dr. Martin Luther King, Dr. Ralph Abernathy, Andrew Young, and others who were a part of the civil rights movement. They stood side by side. Edward Brooks, the senator from Massachusetts, he wasn't afraid to stand side by side as they marched up and down Birmingham, Alabama, Selma, Alabama, in Mississippi, and other places around this nation, protesting the injustice that African Americans have experienced since 1619, when we first came to this nation as first indentured slaves, very briefly, and for the majority of the time as slaves. Rallied together. Didn't matter what their status was. Didn't matter what their economic class was. They got together and spoke out against injustice. We don't do that with people who have challenged ability, though, as I've said before, and I'm going to give you a list. I'm going to provide you a list of people who have special challenges, who are in the entertainment field right now, who are in the scientific arena right now, who are in the political field right now. You know, the governor of Texas, he's in a wheelchair, and yet he vehemently denounces the ADA, the American Disability Act, signed by George H.W. Bush in 1990. The governor of Texas, whose doors were open to him because of the ADA and his fight against discrimination, allowed him to become governor while in a wheelchair. And when he was the Attorney General of Texas, he fought against the ADA in Texas to help others who were in wheelchairs, that supported others who had physical, developmental, and mental challenges. He was against it. He who benefited from it. Talking about hypocrisy. But today we're going to talk about what exactly do we expect as challenged people in America. Yes, we know there's a small group of us who are confined to their beds, who have conditions that are terminal, who have conditions that are irreversible, who have conditions that leave them with very little abilities at all. Good afternoon, Debbie. But the majority of people who have challenged abilities have gifts and talents and can contribute to the society and have contributed to society over the years and continue to do so. So what do we expect from society? What response do we expect from society as we begin to move forward out of our closets, out of our beds, out of the institutions, nursing homes, and other places that they place us or they force us in, or because of the interaction with people on the outside, we feel more comfortable and safer inside to avoid the hassle on the outside. Whereas we move and press against that, How should society respond to it? What do those with challenge abilities expect from society? Well, I want to talk about what I expect as a person who was born with cerebral palsy back in 1951 and who has lived with one sort of disability or another all of his life. Well, the first thing that I expect is that every public institution be accessible and inclusive of those who have challenged abilities. Churches and other religious buildings, such as synagogues, mosques, temples, become accessible. It's a shame that some of them are exempt from it because the government cannot force them to do it, that they choose to lean on and rely on and depend on that exemption to not do what they should be doing from the heart. I don't believe that the religious community should find themselves relieved of the responsibility of going in every community, dealing with every group, dealing with every person in this world to promote what they believe is the truth. Many of them they don't put up ramps. They don't have Braille Bibles and other things. They don't have TTY machines or deaf interpreters. They don't have things that would accommodate people who have ADHD or autism or Down syndrome. They don't have anything in their congregations or their churches that will help and will assist them into becoming a part of their religious body. And they use for excuse that they can't afford it or they're exempt from it because the government cannot force them to do it, so they take a posture of, I'm sorry, we just can't do it. No kind of ministry at all, not even go to where they are, which doesn't cost you anything. How much would getting 100 Braille Bibles or 10 Braille Bibles or 5 Braille Bibles or a Braille Bible? How much would it cost? Sometimes what are being so conscious in terms of cost, we forget the obligation we have that in the Christian faith, our Lord Yeshua told his followers to go into all the world, and that means every place, everywhere, touching every life. What about that obligation? What about that expectation? What about that mandate? That command. It's called the Great Commission. That command. He commissioned us to go to the hedges and highways. He commissioned us. He compelled us to invite the lame, the blind, the maimed. This is according to the word of God, the Bible. Inviting them to the banquet table. Good afternoon, Karen. But are we doing it? No, we're hiding behind the fact that we can't afford it, and nobody, people with disabilities, people with challenged abilities, they don't avail themselves to come to our church anyway. So we don't believe the cost is worth it because there's nobody disabled sitting in our congregations. But the paradox of all of that is this: they can't get in because they can't get in. They can't participate in your worship experience because it's not accessible to them. That's the paradox. As long as you do nothing to accommodate people with challenged abilities, whether it be mobility challenges, whether it be developmental challenges, or whether it be mental challenges, as long as you don't accommodate that, you'll never have but a few, if anybody, in your congregation with a challenge of one sort or another. It's a catch-22. As long as you do nothing, you'll have no one. It's when you begin reaching out. And if you can't afford it in your building, you can't bring your building up to par, why can't you have a ministry outside your building? Why can't you find rent for one Sunday or Saturday, whatever your worship experience is? Have a day in the month where you rent a building or you get a building that you know you can get cheap or inexpensively. to have a special worship service? Why can't you go to the homes like in our city here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania? There's a place called English House. Why can't you get a congregation on the third Sunday of the month? We used to do it when I had my ministry. We would go to English House every third Sunday. And we had a small congregation, but we would go every third Sunday to English House. Didn't cost us anything but a bus trip, a token, $2 or $3 at the most, to minister to those people until you can get the funds, until you can raise the money, until your consciousness is so advanced and so redirected that you begin to see the value in having people with challenged abilities in your congregation. I expect that historic and public buildings here in Philadelphia, the Liberty Independence Hall, many of them are accessible, but there's many places around the country certainly that have historic significance. Even here in the city, there are some buildings that you still can't get into. Any building that's public, you should be able to get into. Stores that advertise and claim that they serve the community should serve all of the community and everybody in it. I expect full health coverage, where medications, assistive devices, required doctor's visits, and surgical procedures are guaranteed to those who have challenged abilities. Where independent living is promoted, encouraged, and made possible. Some people have to go into a home not because they couldn't make it out in an independent living situation, but because they don't have the funds or there is no independent living situation that it can be a part of. I expect employers and businesses that are financially able to make things accessible, even the particular job that a challenged person is qualified to do. In other words, if you're a clerk on the register and you can't stand, there should be some accommodation where you can sit and still be that clerk, still be the cashier that takes in the money and does the change. If you're able to do that and you're qualified to do that, there should be accommodations made, adjustments made so that you can work and fulfill the abilities that you do have. I worked at a job for years, and a good portion of the time, I was able to get young men I taught high school, and I was able to get young men from the high school to walk me during a time of inclement weather, in particular when it was ice and snow on the ground, to walk me to work. At that time, I wasn't in the wheelchair, but like I said, I was born with cerebral palsy. I had some other physical challenges, orthopedic physical challenges that developed as a teenager. So by the time you're talking about I was in my 40s, I had been physically challenged all my life. So they would walk me, help me, because my balance was very poor. They would help me go to work. I'd be the first one in class. I would open up the high school, the building where the high school was. I'd open it up. Other teachers would drag in there by and by. The beginning of the school time, I had all the classes with me until the other teachers came on in. But after about the 6th year, I was informed that the new director of the school felt that I had to get to work the best way I could and would not allow the young men to come and help me get down from where I lived. I lived up the street from the school. But once again, I had not enough balance to really walk there securely. So they would come and get me. But now the new rules were I had to get there the best I could. And of course, I could not get there the best I could. The rule was made, ironically, in March, and at a time when the snow and the ice was on the ground. The new policy was implemented when they knew that I couldn't come back to work like that. Jobs should accommodate people. Now, what did that? I mean, was that anything in the budget? Those kids weren't paid nothing. If anything, I would give them something Out of my own coffers, out of my own pocket. I would rather buy them some, some treat or something. They wanted something from the store. I would get them. I would accommodate them out of my pocket. Didn't cost the school anything. Thank you, Karen. Karen says, if you want to go back over to English House every third Sunday, I would go with you. Thank you, and I'm going to seriously consider that. And I thank you for that invitation and that suggestion that I go back and that you would come and support us as well. I'm going to look into that. I'm going to look into that this week coming. God bless you for that. Next, another expectation I had. I expected salaries. This is a big issue. I expected salaries for those who are specially challenged should be the same as their able-bodied counterparts. There was a law passed in 1938. It was called the Fair Labor Standard Act. And it said that people with challenged abilities could get paid less than the minimum wage. Even now, there are places, some goodwill agencies, industry agencies, they pay their people it's not even called a salary. I would barely call it a stipend. 20-something cents an hour and things like that. And they hide behind that act. Ironically, the president of the United States at that time in 1938 was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who himself was in a wheelchair with polio. See, we're in a position, we've been in positions of authority over the years where he could have vetoed that bill. He could have vetoed that bill. Micaiah, God bless you for being with us. He could have vetoed that bill. He was in a wheelchair. He had polio, but he was president of the United States. So he had what he needed. He didn't know what to worry about no minimum salary. He was getting maximum salary. But instead of looking at his counterparts, his peers, others who had polio, cerebral palsy, MS, multiple sclerosis, MD, muscular dystrophy, other physical challenges, instead of him championing the cause, he signed the bill that then became law. The Fair Standard Labor Act that allowed employers to pay their challenged ability employees less than the minimum salary. It's still a law even today. It's still a law even today, 2017. I expect curbs to be cut and sidewalks paved, allowing people with mobility challenges the ability to go wherever they want to go without being impeded and blocked and barred from getting there because either the streets are so messed up or there are no curb cuts that lead from the street to the sidewalk. For those who have mobility issues, I want to see restaurants that have lifts or elevators or ramps. I want to see restaurants for those who are blind that have braille menus. I want to see a real conscientious effort of this society to include and embrace, good afternoon, Brandon, those of us who are physically challenged. I want to see it. I expect that. I expect that restaurants will have enough room in the restaurant for wheelchairs to maneuver, for people who have challenged abilities to maneuver around it. There's no reason why a certain amount of menus cannot be printed in Braille. These are things that can be done, should be done, and I expect them to be done. I expect more rental and mortgage properties to be both accessible and affordable to people who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges. We don't have enough housing. Good afternoon, Courtney. We don't have enough housing. We don't have enough housing. And it is a travesty. Rental property that you can't even get into. Places that are not challenge friendly. I expect that to happen. I expect that public transportation systems throughout this country, everywhere, are made accessible to persons with challenges. There are places right now, both cities and certainly rural areas, that have public transportations, buses and trains and other means of public transportation that are still not accessible to people with physical challenges. I know even in Philadelphia, good afternoon, Pam, even in Philadelphia, we have a system called the trolley system. And trolleys are not accessible to people in wheelchairs. And that's one of the largest cities in the nation. I expect that the issues that impact the lives of people with challenge abilities will become high priority for a change. And not always swept under the rug or put in some committee somewhere to die in the committee. I expect that governmental branches and agencies and systems will begin to put the high priority, make high priority issues that impact lives of people with challenged abilities. That our concerns are taken seriously and dealt with expediently. I expect that everyone who has a challenged ability is respected and treated as a first class, not a second class citizen in this nation, which we now are. Respect people for who they are. Treat them as first class, not second class citizens. When we go into a store, we have to pay the same amount of money to buy something that anybody else has to pay. People with challenge ability, many of us pay taxes or have paid taxes. Just like everybody else. There's no reduction in tax. There's no reduction in buying things for the most part for people with challenged abilities. So if we're treated like first-class citizens when it comes to things that profit the nation, then we need to be considered as first-class citizens when it comes to issues that impact our lives on a daily basis. I expect that one day soon, ableism, the biased, prejudicial, discriminatory attitude towards people with disabilities will no longer exist, will end. That's what I expect. These are my expectations. And I know because I've talked to many. These are the expectations of many people who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges. We don't want any kind of special treatment. We want to be able to be on an even playing field with the rest of society. An even playing field. That the opportunities that are given to every other citizen, even taken for granted by every other citizen, is provided and are given to us as well. Everything. Shouldn't have to be that it's a special problem and it's something we got to talk about. No. Talk about what? Talk about having health care. Talk about being able to walk, to get up and down the streets and the sidewalks. Talk about being able to get in public buildings. Everybody else does it, but they take it for granted. We can go outside right now. I know I can get on a bus. I know I can get on a trolley. I know I can go into any church I choose to go into. I can go into any mosque, any synagogue, any temple, any place I want to go, I can go. Used to be a time that African Americans Americans couldn't go anywhere. Used to be a time that homosexuals couldn't go anywhere. Used to be a time that a lot of people couldn't go anywhere, but they fought a good fight. And now every door that is meant to be a door open to the public is open to every one of them and more. But those same doors are still closed to us. Still closed to us. We have been in this country from the beginning of the country. We've been in this world from the beginning of the world. Check your Bibles. You'll see people who have challenged abilities all the way in the Old Testament. Yeah, still we're fighting a fight really that should have been won centuries ago. Eons ago. We're still fighting it like it's a new battle. What? We're still fighting to be able to have every voting place accessible so that we can vote. The 33 million of us who are registered to vote and qualified to vote and eligible to vote. Some of us can't even get into the polling places. What? Some of us can't get into restaurants, certain restaurants and certain other public buildings. What? In 2017, we're still there? We can send a man to the moon and spend millions and billions and trillions of dollars doing other things. And we can't even spend even millions to make things accommodating to people who have challenged abilities. You can't tell me that's the truth. The truth is, we don't care enough. We haven't cared, and to a certain extent, we still don't care enough to make a real significant difference in the lives of people with challenged abilities. Oh yeah, we'll cut them off the roll. We'll cut their benefits. We'll do that. We'll take forever to give them, if they need a wheelchair, we'll take forever to approve the wheelchair and get it to the person. We'll do that. Certain tests that they need to have, we won't cover that. And so they'll go without that test and may be able to determine whether they can get better. We'll do that. But we can't afford. See, I always believe this, that people do whatever they want to do. And they find the means to do it whenever they want to do it. They find a way. They get the money, they get the support, they get the backing, whatever the case may be. They find a way to get done what they want to have done. But when you don't want to do it, any excuse will do. And they come up with all kinds of excuses why not to make the lives of people with challenged abilities better. Other things that many within the disabled community want to reconsider the use of the word disability and disabled. I know that's going to be a hard one, to break, because we've been calling people with challenged abilities disabled and people with disabilities forever. And even now, I find it, so I'll slip myself, because it's a word, a phrase, a term that's been used so long that it's synonymous with who we are. Good afternoon, Ingrid. But the word, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, means someone who is limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified to do anything. Now think about that. That's what the word disability. So I don't want to be called crippled. I want to be called disabled. But think about what that word means. Limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified from doing anything. Now, if you fit in that category, then use the word, but I don't fit in that category. The definition brings to mind an image of a broken object, unusable and ineffective. A broken object, unusable and ineffective. And we wonder why people treat us like this. We wonder why they ostracize us. We wonder why they don't embrace us. We wonder why they try to avoid us. We wonder why they ignore us. We wonder why they exclude us. Because somewhere in the recesses of the meaning of the word itself, anytime you diss something, It means I'm lessening you. I put you over here. You're able, you're disabled. That means you're not able. Disrespect means I don't respect you. I'm not respecting you. I'm disrespecting you. That's why my group is called Taking the Dis Out of Disability. That's my motto. Taking the dis out of disability. I want to get rid of the dis and emphasize the ability. Yes, I have challenges. There's no doubt about it. More now than before. God bless you, Apostle Simpson. More now than before. I grant you that. But I want to emphasize what I can do and not always concentrate on what I can't do. I want to think like that, and I want people to think of me like that. And so do many others who are physically, developmentally, and mentally challenged. Number 2, we need to stop automatically assuming that a person with a challenged ability must have an IQ of 10. You hear me? We must get this out of our mind. Everybody with a disability, everybody with a challenged ability, you must have an IQ of 10. What do you mean? What do you mean, Red? What do you mean, Bishop? What do you mean, Gerald? What do you mean, G-Man? What I mean is this. When I go to a restaurant and I'm with an able-bodied person, whether it be my wife, my daughter, whoever I'm with, they don't ask me what I want, or they don't ask me directly what I need, or they don't question me or make comments towards me. They'll make comments about me to somebody else that's with me who's able-bodied. I'll go to a restaurant, and instead of asking me what I would like to eat, they'll ask my wife or whoever I'm with who's able-bodied, and my wife looks like she's able-bodied. They'll ask them to, what does he want to eat? Like I can't answer that question because I'm in a wheelchair. I can't answer that question because I'm have cerebral palsy, so I walk a little funny when I used to walk, and now I'm in a wheelchair. It's even worse because now they think that I really can't answer simple questions like whether I want roast beef, chicken, or whether I want a hamburger. Whether I want Pepsi or whether I want Coke or whether I want root beer or whether I want iced tea. Like I can't answer that question. God bless you, Jacob. Automatically assuming that my IQ is a 10. Then some people talk to me like I'm deaf, like I'm hard of hearing. Hello, how you doing? What do you want? I'm in a wheelchair. Nobody said anything wrong with my ears. These condescending approaches and attitudes to people with challenged abilities must end. Unlike what many able-bodied people think, we are able to answer whatever question is asked of us. The majority of us are able to do that. And you won't know until you ask us. Now, if there is a challenge there with our developmental intellectual abilities to respond to you, you approach us with respect. And you ask us. And if I can't comprehend or understand or cannot answer the question you're asking, then either I or someone else will tell you that. But don't you assume because I'm in a wheelchair, don't you assume because I have a challenged ability that automatically I have an IQ of 10 and automatically I must be deaf as well. Come on, people. We're not babies and we're not deaf. I went to Temple University. 2 majors. Political science and religion. I went to a seminary. Got a Bachelor of Theology. Taught high school. Pastored for over 20 years. And you mean I can't answer the question, do I want chicken or a hamburger? But you won't know that if you assume I can't answer. And I'm not going to go to every restaurant and give my resume out before you come and approach me. I'm not going to say, hear ye, hear ye. I graduated from high school. I went to college and I finished seminary. I'm not going to announce myself. I'm not going to dignify that with anything. But you approach people with respect. And you ask them. You want to know what I want to eat? Ask me. If a person who has a physical, developmental, or mental challenge cannot answer, you will soon learn. But your approach is ask them as you would ask anybody that comes to your restaurant. Like you would ask that able-bodied person that comes to your restaurant. And you'd be surprised, some people that you may think are able-bodied really aren't. They have a disability too, but it's an invisible one. A third concern and expectation is this: the way we address people, the way we talk about people, the words we use. I call them that we need to be just as politically correct when dealing with people with challenged abilities as we would anybody else. I call them words with dignity. For example, word with dignity would be person with challenged ability. That's the words with dignity. That's words with dignity. Person or people with challenged ability. Words to avoid would be crippled, handicapped, invalid. The word invalid actually means you're invalid. So when you talk about somebody as an invalid, you're saying you're invalid. You don't matter. You don't count. You're invalid. The word handicap, its roots are that people came back during the 17th century from a war in England, and they came back home and they were physically challenged and they were unable to get work. So they had to take their cap in their hand to beg for money. That's where the word handicap comes from. Challenged, abilitied veterans that came back from war and were not able to get a job took their caps, and many of them took the hats that they wore as soldiers, and took it by their hand and passed it around to get some meager change from people just to live. Person, another word of dignity, a person with cerebral palsy, or a person with multiple sclerosis, or a person with muscular dystrophy, or a person with diabetes or lupus or cystic fibrosis or asthma or whatever the case may be. You're a person with this. You're a person first. And then you have whatever condition you may have. Words to avoid in this same context would be your victim. You're afflicted with. You're afflicted by. Words with dignity uses a wheelchair. I use a wheelchair. Words to avoid. You're confined to a wheelchair. You're wheelchair bound. God bless you, Darlene. Good to see you. Words with dignity. Able-bodied, that's what a person is who's able to function pretty well with their bodies. Words to avoid, normal. Because the implication is, if you're normal, God bless you, Mike. If you're normal, that means I'm abnormal. See, able-bodied, disabled, able-bodied, challenged ability, able-bodied. Okay, that's fine. But when I use a word to avoid that, he's normal, implying that I'm abnormal. Words with dignity, deaf, mental challenge, or emotional disorder. Words to avoid, crazy, schizoid, insane. Words with dignity, deaf, mute. Words to avoid, deaf and dumb. Words with dignity, seizures. Words to avoid, fit. Words with dignity, little person. Words to avoid, midget. Words with dignity, developmental challenge. Words to avoid, retarded or slow. Fourth point we need to deal with. Persons with disabilities in America face systematic and direct forms of discrimination, violence, and harassment. Systematic. Daily, we are faced with directly forms of discrimination, harassment, and violence, such as insults. My wife said interesting words to use and not to use. We have to be careful what we say, what we don't say. We're so careful about everybody else. Nobody easily says the N-word anymore because there's so much backlash to that. No one uses, when referring to African American, no one uses the F word when referring to a person who's a lesbian or homosexual or gay. No, those words aren't used. There's a backlash to that. There's some consequence to that. You can lose your job for that. You can use your place on the air for that. You can use your basketball team or your baseball team or your football team if you're caught using these deflammatory words. But people use carte blanche the word retard and retarded, schizoid, gimp, crippled. Carte blanche, you're crazy. You're slow. Carte blanche, you're a midget. With no repercussions. Our 45th president went on national TV with a live audience of over 4,000 people and millions watching on television, and made fun of a person who had a physical challenge. Oh yeah, there was a momentary outcry by a few, but the man was still elected the 45th president of the United States of America. Donald J. Trump. Still elected the 45th president of the United States of America. Now, can you imagine him saying the N-word on the campaign trail? His whole campaign would have been compromised and he would have been defeated at the polls. There would have been no electoral college debate because he wouldn't have gotten that far. But he makes fun visibly. Not just a word. He actually makes fun of them, how they move. He mocked the way they moved. Two gentlemen who were reporters who also had a physical challenge in their lives. Made fun of twice. Two men. Good afternoon, Prophet. Good afternoon, Herman. Two men. Donald Trump made fun of during the campaign. And instead of there being some repercussions, he was made the 45th president of the United States of America. Persons with disabilities in America face systematic and direct forms of discrimination, violence, and harassment, such as insults, bullying, isolation, shunning, daily mockery, physical, emotional, and psychological abuse, and disenfranchisement, the state of being deprived the right or a privilege. Commonplace. Ordinary. It's gotten so bad that it's almost taken for granted. You know, more than 50% of the instances of police brutality against the citizens of this nation are against people who have one form of challenged ability or another. I've said it before. Eric Gardner was not just a black man. He was also a man who had a heart condition, asthma, and was obese. Sandra Bland, who was arrested and jailed for a minor traffic violation and ended up dead in the cell, was not just a black woman, but she also had epilepsy and was a manic depressive. And I could give you all kinds of stories of people who have challenged abilities who were either killed, violently treated, and mistreated. We heard a few weeks ago, A young man was in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and he was going into a 7-Eleven. He had cerebral palsy. And a young man was outside. He was from Coatesville, though he was originally from Georgetown, Delaware. And he started making fun of the man as he was walking into the 7-Eleven store. Surveillance cameras were outside, so they recorded exactly what happened. When the man with cerebral palsy came out to get back into his car, the other man kept on mocking him and punched him in the face, sucker punched him in the face. For no good reason. There was no good reason. Just the fact that I want to bully. Just the fact I want to be abusive. Just the fact I can do it and I will do it. Another young man was being molested by some teenagers and preteens right in North Philadelphia. He too was sucker punched by the 12-year-old. And as he was trying to get away, a 15-year-old hit him again. He had a developmental challenge. This is commonplace. I could give you example over example over example. But I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to say this before we end this program today. Is that people with challenged abilities are not going to take it anymore. I have a young man on here now that's joining us. His name is Herman Parati. And he's the president of one of the organizations I'm a member of. An advocacy, actually an activist group of disabled people, people with challenged abilities. And he and we and they go up and down the eastern coast and even throughout the country, advocating and actively involving themselves in breaking down the stereotype that we're just passive, docile, accepting, stoic, suffering bravely. Sit-ins and protests we have. Many of them have gone, he included, have been to jail, been arrested. For what? For defending the rights that most Americans take for granted. And I think these men and these women, these young people that are coming up behind me even, I admire them for taking a different stance. He's in a wheelchair. I've had people who are members of this group that are blind. There are people that are members of this group that are literal in stature, that are deaf, in wheelchairs, walk with canes and crutches and the like, you know. But they go. Many of them have birth defects. Many of them have had accidents that have caused them to become challenged in life. But they don't let their condition define who they are. They don't let their condition hold them back for fighting for what they know they have every right to have in their lives, in our lives, all of our lives. And all of us need to begin, whether you're able or disabled, whatever your fight is, to begin standing up. Stop being just so submissive to everything. What would have happened if Dr. King and Malcolm X and even Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown and all of them during the civil rights movement, if all of them would have said, well, it's been this way for 100 years and so been this way for 300 years. What can we do? They did something and they affected change. They got tired and they said, we ain't going to take it anymore. We have to become like that, even more so than what we are. We need to support organizations like ADAPT, Disabled in Action, and other groups around this nation who are fighting the good fight, who are defending a right cause, who are establishing justice and liberty and equality for everyone, especially in their instance, those who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges. Everything that I discussed today, all these biases, all these ableistic views, all these prejudicial positions need to change. And we who have challenged abilities need to make sure that these changes are implemented as quickly as possible. The way we begin doing this is by making sure that we get out of our place of comfort, out of our places of isolation and safety, and begin to interact with the rest of society, boldly advocating and actively and aggressively, not violently, but aggressively making sure that our voices are heard and our demands are met. Good afternoon, Tiki. We have been out of sight, out of mind far too long. Dear hearts, we have been out of sight and out of mind far too long. It's about time we take our destiny in our hands and let the world know who we are and the contributions that we have made, can make, and will make to this society. No longer are we going to take it anymore. No longer are we going to grin and bear it. No longer are we going to take that posture of docility. We're going to become first-class, first-rate citizens. The largest minority group in the country and in the world are people with challenged abilities. 60 million in this country, 1 billion around the world. And yet we're the most disenfranchised. We are the most taken advantage of. We are the most denied and ignored group of them all. It's time now for we who can stand up for others who can't, because there are many people in the disability community that cannot stand up for themselves. They're in a position where they cannot fight for. They really are disabled in the strictest sense. They are limited to the extent that they really can't fight for themselves. Well, it's up to us that can. It's up to us that can articulate. It's up to us that can speak out. It's up to us that can stand up for them, literally and figuratively. So that everybody who has a challenge, whether it be physical, developmental, or mental, is treated justly, rightly, and with respect. Well, that's our show for this afternoon. We hope that you have gained some insight as to the demands as well as the desires that each of us who have physical challenges seek within the larger society, into the mainstream society. We expect a response from society and a change in attitude of society and a different disposition, legally and morally. Until next time, Monday, 3 p.m., have a blessed weekend. And remember to look up. The fight ain't over until the battle has been won. And the battles are going to keep on being fought until victory finally is ours.